Hey everyone, this is Emma Craig for the class GIS 510 at NC State University. This is my final project concept. So I chose to look at the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest in Washington. The overall topic that I looked at was the impact of invasive species on wetlands and streams in this national park. So my first question is, what are the top three invasive species found in wetlands, which I'll be showing you the map for in a second. These are the top three invasive species that I found. They're unfortunately pretty. And then the second question is, what percentage of buffers are covered by forested land, which is data I'm going to source from the U.S. Fish and Wild or U.S. Forest Service and their data that they have in raster data. And then my third question is, what is the acreage of stream buffers that are impacted by invasive species? And what about wetlands? And what about both of them together so that we can prioritize areas that need to be focused on? And that's the data that I will be talking to you about in a second. It'll be the same data that I used for my first question, just analyzed in a different way. So the reason that I'm looking at all this information is because I want to look at how invasive species are impacting our stream buffers and our wetlands, because our freshwater sources are obviously important, and when we introduce invasive species into these areas, it hurts the aesthetic of that area as well as the quality of the habitat, because invasive species, they're called invasive because they're taking over the land that our native species usually live in, and they are detrimental to the survival of our native species. And in a national forest, of course, we want our native species to shine through, because we don't want our national forest to be representing other countries' land. We want it to represent our land and how it's been for hundreds of years. So it's for these reasons that I want to be looking at how invasive species are impacting our buffers and our wetlands, because we need to be removing those whenever we can, especially in our national forests. So this is my online map that I created to answer my first question of what are our top three invasive species found within this section of the Gifford-Pinchot National Park. So to create this map, I sourced my data from the USDA. As I mentioned earlier, the raster data is not in there yet, but I sourced my invasive plant locations from the USDA, and then the wetlands from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service website. I can click on Washington up here. I use the Washington DOT just for reference with that one road going through my site. And so this all got combined into my online map here. And to create this online map, I first created this clip box, which you can see in the yellow, just to cut down all the data, because it was a lot of data that was slowing down my computer. And then I had to project that data because it was in geographic data, not in projected coordinate data, so I projected it. And then I buffered my streams by 100 feet, as I mentioned earlier, because the EPA says that's most effective, so theoretically we'd have nice 100-foot buffers. And then I intersected my data with the intersect tool. So I intersected my wetlands data and my invasive species data to get that information in my orange. And then I intersected my stream buffer and my invasive species locations to get the pink, where there are invasive species in stream buffers. And then because every single time they submitted a location for the invasive species, it became a new row within the attribute table basically. I had to dissolve that data by dissolving the common name of the species so that when it recurred, it just kind of combined into one, as the tool does what it's supposed to do. And then I calculated the area for those species that were occurring so that I could answer the question to our first one. So let's see, our top three invasive species in wetlands is our Scotch broom, common hawkweed, and Eurasian water milfoil. And then in our stream buffers, our top three species were, oh, wrong button, was common hawkweed, mouse ear hawkweed, and Scotch broom. My expectations for this data is that the majority of the stream buffers is going to be forested because we are in a national forest. However, I do think there are some areas that are going to be not forested. They're going to be disturbed. As you can kind of see in the aerial in the background here, there's some areas. And then as well as that, for the stream buffers, I do think that the impact on that is going to be significant, because you can see these pink areas, especially up here, large areas that are impacted by invasive species, as well as wetlands, which is a smaller impact. So I'm expecting overall that probably this area is going to be the most severely impacted, and then as well as that, the majority of stream buffers are going to be forested.